This UBCO Okanagan student spent his summer cycling to the Arctic Ocean to raise funds and awareness for a Canadian Mental Health Association. Mikey Friedland, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, Mikey, what are you studying in university?
I'm in my fourth year of an international relations major at UBC Okanagan.
Oh, wow. And how old are you?
I'm 23.
23. So, how did you spend your summer this year, Mikey?
I spent most of my summer on a bicycle. So yeah, yeah. I left a Soyuz on May 21st, and I cycled. I was on the road for 3 months, to get all the way up to the Arctic Ocean.
What inspired you to do this and help this association?
A lot of things. So I always knew that one day I wanted to just do a big adventure. Growing up in Toronto, my family would go on canoe trips in the summer, and that kind of just gave me that love of the outdoors and of camping. And when I moved out west 5 years ago, I started doing more like day trips, multi-day trips, that kind of thing. And I did a really cool 4-day trip in the spring, a ski trip, and before that and after that I was like, oh man, I got to do something. But it was also motivated largely by my mental state at the time, which was relatively depressed and confused and dealing with a lot of the same pandemic anxiety that a lot of people have gone through in the last year. So I took the whole year off of school last year because I didn't think that online school would work really well for me. And I moved to Revelstoke, and I had a good fall, but then in the winter I was laid off and I was on EI, and I didn't have direction. I didn't really know what I was doing, and this was a pretty easy way to have a direction, just pedal north until land runs out. Yeah.
So how did this start? How did you decide that I'm going to get on my bike? And can you tell us about this association, the Ride Don't Hide initiative?
Totally, yeah. So at the start, biking was just a means to an end of exploring, of challenging myself. I ended up really loving the biking by the end of it. I knew I wanted to do something human powered, and my friend sold me his touring bike, and for a really, really nice price, I should say, like way under what it was worth, largely because he knew what I wanted to do with it. And from that point, everything kind of just kicked into gear. And I also knew, especially with what I'd been going through in the spring, that I wanted the ride to be for more than just me. So that's where the CMHA comes in. So the Canadian Mental Health Association is really cool because it's a nationwide organization that operates much like a grassroots one. So there's different branches in like 68 different Canadian cities, and I wanted to fundraise for branches that fell along my route. And the thing that's so cool about this like branch organization of it is that when those individual branches get to direct their funds to whatever the most prescient issues in the community are. So in Whitehorse, for example, they have a real shortage of counseling options. So the CMHA has 8 full-time counselors offering 12-session problem-based counseling that's free to anyone in the community. And so, yeah, knowing what I had gone through as well as just in general, like mental health is such an important thing that we don't talk about enough, and we're getting there. And part of what I've seen in response to wearing a bike jersey that says bring mental health out into the open and posting on social media is that so many people share the interest and desire to bring mental health out into the open. We just need more people to continue the conversation. So for me, it was it was 2 parts. It was supporting an organization that does good work on the ground level, but then also the very act of just shedding some light on mental health and helping to destigmatize it.
And how many miles and days did it take you to reach the Arctic Ocean?
So the whole route was about 4,000 kilometers, just over. It was also nearly 25,000 meters of vertical climbing. So that's basically 3 times up Mount Everest, which is pretty cool. And it was about 50 days on the bike, and then about 40 days of exploring the communities that I was in, and also spending some time editing. So one big part of my journey has been making this video series documenting it, and that's been really cool because it added another layer to the trip. Not only was I focused on just cranking out the kilometers, I was also focused on telling the story of my own lived experience, and then also the stories of the people that I met.
I was going to ask, where did you stay? Did you have help? Did you know where you were going?
Tons of help. Like, it's funny. So this was like technically a solo, unsupported bike journey, but there was nothing unsupported about it. I mean, it was unsupported in the sense that I didn't have like a minivan following me the whole way, but I had strangers welcome me into their homes countless times. I stayed with a family in Smithers for 5 days. I stayed with a family in Whitehorse for almost 2 weeks. I was fed dozens of times. By the end of the trip, I stopped filling up my own water bottle. Like I used at the start of the trip, I would fill 2 to 3 liters at a time, and then by the end of the trip, I was just filling 1 liter because I was so confident that like every third car would stop, ask how I'm doing, and see if I want some water, and it was just way easier to get water from them than it was to like filter my own water from the streams. See, I had tons of help, and that was the best part too, because when people help you, they open up themselves, and that can be a gateway to some really, really wonderful interactions.
So what was your starting point and your end point?
My start point was Osoyoos. I picked it because, well, I should say just south of Osoyoos, the U.S. border crossing. I wanted to go from the southernmost point, the 49th parallel, all the way up to the northernmost point that you can cycle to. So, I mean, technically the southernmost point in Canada is Point Pelee in Ontario, but I wasn't going to go out there. So I picked Osoyoos because it was the closest to my home in Revelstoke, and I could cycle through the Okanagan. It was great. I'd lived in Kelowna for 3 years, and I never cycled the rail trail. But doing that was one of the highlights of the trip, from Penticton to Kelowna. And then up to Vernon. And then I finished in Tuktoyaktuk in the Mackenzie Delta in the Northwest Territories. So it's a small Inuvialuit community of about 1,000 people nestled right on the Arctic Ocean.
Wow, that's a long ride.
It was a long ride.
What was your favorite part of doing this challenge?
It was definitely the people. I mean, there's a lot of personal growth that I was really happy with. Like, I feel more confident. I became, a little bit more comfortable with who I am and with being on my own. But definitely the people were the highlight. And yeah, so many interesting interactions, people I still keep in touch with, people I'm following on social media now, and just memories and stuff like that that'll stick with me. But as far as like a particular place, there was a lot. Like I genuinely loved doing the KVR through the Okanagan. Smithers was really cool. The whole stretch up Highway 37, which is the video that I just released today, that's what that's all about. That was great. Whitehorse is great. Dawson City's great. But the Mackenzie Delta and the Dempster Highway, which is the last segment of my trip, that's definitely the cake. Like, that's the Mackenzie Delta. So you go through 500 kilometers of road on the Dempster Highway, which is a dirt road. It's the only road in and out of the Mackenzie Delta. It's 500 kilometers where there's no settlements, no towns. And then you drop down from the Richardson Mountains, which are the most northern appendage of the Rocky Mountains. And all of a sudden it's flat for as far as the eye can see. And there are these communities there. There's 5 of them. And it's a mix between Gwich'in and Inuvialuit. So the Gwich'in communities are mainly in the south. And then the Inuvialuit community, Tuktoyaktuk is the largest Inuvialuit community. But the people up there are so friendly. And it was such a unique experience. Yeah.
And you say all these advantages. What were some of the disadvantages that you faced? Were you ever in danger?
In danger? I mean, I ran into almost 20 bears and had a moose about 8 feet away from me just pop out of nowhere. So, I mean, objectively, probably was in danger. I mean, I didn't have any really close calls with trucks, but there certainly were some trucks that came a little bit closer than what I would feel comfortable with on an everyday basis. Yeah, other disadvantages, well, not disadvantages, but other things that I had to like overcome, I guess, would be mosquitoes were terrible. Um, Weather, especially on the Dempster, was pretty harsh. Like there was a couple days of 3 degrees and rainy, and you get so far up north that like you want to set up like a tarp to go under, but the trees are so little because they're so far north that like sometimes you're out of tree line, you can't even put up a tarp. For a brief period of time, I was traveling with another cyclist who instead of having a tent, he had a hammock, which was like not ideal for when you're out of tree line. So there was one day where we had to pedal like an extra 40 kilometers just to get down below tree line again, so that we could put up his hammock.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, because I just had a one-person tent and I didn't want him coming in there. So,
And how much did you end up raising?
so far, so the fundraiser is still live, and I'm going to keep it up until I release the finale, which I hope to do in mid-October. So far, we're at nearly $30,000.
Wow.
Yeah, so split 3 ways between the Canadian Mental Health Association branch in Revelstoke, Shuswap, the branch in northern BC that's based out of Prince George, and the Yukon division of the CMHA, based out of Whitehorse.
How has the feedback been? Did you expect this? Did you expect you were going to raise 30 grand for these charities?
No, I had no idea. Yeah, I set the goal at 10, and I thought that was unrealistic, to be completely honest. But I figured I'd rather set it high than low, and yeah, it's really great. But it's not. It's the money is wonderful, and thank you to the people who've donated. But it's the feedback, it's the the messages that I've got. Messages of support and people sharing their own stories. Yeah, it makes you feel more connected in a really powerful and an important way.
Have you ever cycled before this trip? And are you planning on doing this again?
That's funny. No, like I hadn't even cycled 50 kilometers in a day before this trip. I did 3 little training rides around Revelstoke, and then I just figured I'd make it up as I go. And yeah, I would definitely do another one, absolutely. And I think that there's a lesson in there, which is that, like sometimes the best way to learn is just to throw yourself headfirst into something and figure it out as you go. And yeah, it seems like in the world there's so many reasons not to start something or not to commit to something, but sometimes that's the best thing you can do, even if it's just a little daunting at the start. But yeah, I'm already thinking of the possibilities. One thing I'm thinking about is starting in a Soyuz and going all the way down to the southern tip of Argentina.
That was my next question. So, what are your upcoming projects or goals?
That's an idea. Part of me would also just like to do a luxurious little hostel-to-hostel cruise around Europe, and then maybe something off the bike. I love climbing. I love skiing. I love travel. One of the things that really came out of this trip, actually, like you'll see it if you go and watch the video, is like when I'm 200 kilometers from the Yukon, biking in the middle of nowhere, I just have this revelation that I don't actually necessarily want to work in international relations. I want to be a documentary filmmaker.
Oh, wow.
So perhaps the next step for me, adventure-wise, is the adventure of film school and yeah, getting out there and working on my craft.
Would you say that this journey helped your mental health? And
Yes, totally. I mean, exercising, being outside, having great human interaction, all of that stuff was hugely impactful. Absolutely.
what is your advice for people who would like to do something like this but perhaps are scared? Or what can you share? A lesson that's helped you, or
I would like to say first that like I'm privileged to be able to do this in the first place. I have a familial and kind of friendship support network that helped me when I was feeling down, encouraged me, motivated me, supported me. I had the financial ability to do it, and so there's a lot of limitations, and I don't want to downplay them when I suggest that people should just go for it. But with that being said, like it still takes a big leap of courage sometimes to just do it, but it's so worth it. It's it's like, you know, you're building memories for yourself, if nothing else. And that's a pretty rad thing to think about.
Wow, Mikey, I think what you did is amazing, and
Thank you.
thank you for being with us here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.